An anarchist FAQ, Can Market Dominance by Big Business Change, Chapter C.6. Capital concentration, of course, does not mean that in a given market, dominance will continue forever by the same firm, no matter what. However, the fact that the companies that dominate a market can change over time is no great cause for joy, no matter what supporters of free market capitalism claim. This is because when market dominance changes between companies, all it means is that old big business is replaced by new big business. Once oligopoly emerges in an industry, one should not assume that sustained competitive advantage will be maintained forever. Once achieved in any given product market, oligopoly creates barriers to entry that can be overcome only by the development of even more powerful forms of business organization that can plan and coordinate even more complex specified divisions of labor. William Lazonick, from Business Organization and the Myth of the Market Economy. The assumption that the degree of monopoly will rise over time is an obvious one to make, and, in general, the history of capitalism has tended to support doing so. While periods of rising concentration will be interspersed with periods of constant or falling levels, the general trend will be upwards. We would expect the degree of monopoly to remain the same or fall during booms and rise to new levels in slumps. Yet, even if the degree of monopoly falls or new competitors replace old ones, it is hardly a great improvement, as changing the company hardly changes the impact of capital concentration or big business on the economy. When the faces may change, the system itself remains the same. As such, it makes a little real difference if, for a time, a market is dominated by 6 large firms rather than, say, 4. While the relative level of barriers may fall, the absolute level may increase, and so restrict competition to establish big business, either national or foreign, and it is the absolute level which maintains the class monopoly of capital over labor. Nor should we expect the degree of monopoly to constantly increase. There will be cycles of expansion and contraction in line with the age of the market and the business cycle. It is obvious that at the start of a specific market, there will be a relative high degree of monopoly, as few pioneering create a new industry. Then the level of concentration will fall as competitors enter the market. Over time, the number of firms will drop due to failure and mergers. This process is accelerated during booms and slumps. In the boom, more companies feel able to try setting up or expanding in a specific market, so driving the degree of monopoly down. However, in the slumps, the level of concentration will rise as more and more firms go to the wall or try and merge to survive. For example, there were 100 car producers in the USA in 1929. 10 years later, there were only 3. So our basic point is not dependent on any specific tendency of the degree of monopoly. It can fall somewhat as, say, 5 large firms come to dominate a market rather than, say, over a period of 5 years. The fact remains that barriers to competition remain strong, and denying any claims that any real economy reflects the perfect competition of the textbooks. So, even in a well-developed market, one with a high degree of monopoly, high market concentration and capital costs that create barriers to entry to it, there can be decreases as well as increases in the level of concentration. However, how this happens is significant. New companies can usually only enter under 4 conditions. 1. They have enough capital for them to pay for setup and costs and any initial losses. This can come from 2 main sources: from other parts of their economy, virgin going into the coal business, or large firms from other areas and nations enter the market. The former is part of the diversification process associated with big business, and the second is the globalization of markets resulting from pressures on national oligopolies. See section C.4. Both of which increases competition within a given market for a period as the number of firms in its oligopolistic sector has increased. Over time, however, market forces will result in mergers and growth, increasing the degree of monopoly again. They get state aid to protect themselves against foreign Number 2, they get state aid to protect them against foreign competition until such time as they can compete with established firms and critically expand into foreign markets. Historically, notes Lazonic, political strategies to develop national committees have provided critical protection and support to overcome barriers to entry. An obvious example of this process is, say, the 19th century U.S. economy, or more recently, the Southeast Asian tiger economies, these having an intense and almost unequivocal commitment on the part of government to build up the international competitiveness of domestic industry by creating policies and organizations for governing the market. Robert Wade from Governing the Market. 3. Demand exceeds supply, resulting in a profit level which tempts other big companies into the market or gives smaller firms already there excess profits, allowing them to expand. Demand still plays a limiting role in even the most oligopolistic market, but this process hardly decreases barriers to entry or mobility or oligopolistic tendencies in the long run. 4. The dominant companies raise their prices too high or become complacent and make mistakes, so allowing other big firms to undermine their positions in a market and sometimes allow smaller companies to expand and do the same. For example, many large U.S. oligopolies in the 1970s came under pressure from Japanese oligopolies because of this. However, as noted in section C4.2, these declining oligopolies can see their market control last for decades, and the resulting market will still be dominated by oligopolies, as big firms are generally replaced by similar-sized or bigger ones. Usually, some or all of these processes are at work at once, and some can have contradictory results. Take, for example, the rise of globalization and its impact on the degree of monopoly in a given national market. On the national level, the degree of monopoly may fall as foreign companies invade a given market, particularly one where the national producers are in decline, which has happened to a small degree in UK manufacturing in the 1990s, for example. However, on the net international level, the degree of concentration may well have risen, as only a few companies can actually compete on a global level. Similarly, while the degree of monopoly within a specific national market may fall, the balance of economic power within the economy may shift towards capital, and so place labor in a weaker position to advance its claims. This has undoubtedly been the case with globalization. See section D5.3. Let us consider the U.S. steel industry as an example. The 1980s saw the rise of so-called mini-mills with lower capital costs. These mini-mills, a new industry segment, developed only after the U.S. steel industry had gone into decline due to Japanese competition. The creator of Nippon Steel, matching the size of U.S. steel companies, was a key factor in the rise of the Japanese steel industry, which invested heavily in modern technology to increase steel output by 2,216% in 30 years, 5.3 million tons in 1950 to 122.8 million in 1980. By the mid-1980s, the mini-mills and imports each had a quarter of the U.S. market, with many previously steel-based companies diversifying into new markets. Only by investing $9 billion to increase technological competitiveness, cutting workers' wages to increase labor productivity, getting relief from stringent pollution control laws, and, very importantly, the U.S. government restricting imports to a quarter of the total home market, could the U.S. steel industry survive? The fall in the value of the dollar also helped by making imports more expensive. In addition, U.S. steel firms became increasingly linked with their Japanese rivals, resulting in increased centralization and so concentration of capital. Therefore, only because competition from foreign capital created space in a previously dominated market, driving established capital out, combined with state intervention to protect and aid home crop producers, was a new segment of the industry able to get a foothold in the local market. With many established companies closing down and moving to other markets, and once the value of the dollar fell, which forced import prices up and state intervention reduced foreign competition, the mini mills were in an excellent position to increase U.S. market share. It should also be noted that in this period, the U.S. steel industry was marked by increased cooperation between U.S. and Japanese companies, with larger companies an outcome. This meant, in the case of the mini mills, that the cycle of capital formation and concentration would start again, with bigger companies driving out the smaller ones through competition. Nor should we assume that an oligopolistic market means the end of all small business. Far from it. Not only do small firms continue to exist, big business itself may generate the same scale industry around it, in the form of suppliers or as providers of services to its workers. We are not arguing that small businesses do not exist, but rather that their impact is limited compared to the giants of the business world. In fact, within an oligopolistic market, existing small firms always present a problem, as some might try to grow beyond their established niches. However, the dominant firms will often simply purchase the smaller firm, use its established relationships with customers or suppliers to limit its activities or stand temporary losses, and so cut its prices below the cost of production, until it runs competitors out of business or establishes its price leadership before raising prices again. As such, our basic point is not dependent on any specific tendency of the degree of monopoly. It can fall somewhat as, say, 6 large firms come to dominate a market rather than, say, 4. The fact remains that barriers to competition remain strong and deny any claim that any real economy reflects the perfect competition of the textbooks. So while the actual companies involved may change over time, the economy as a whole will always be marked by big business due to the nature of capitalism. That's the way capitalism works. Profits for the few at the expense of the many.